in a second or two. There. And then I can do camera in. Yes. Good. Good, good, good. If you want, in chat, you can put down that we're now live. Also, we should probably stop our conversation because people are going to only hear my half of it, so it's going to be weird. Very good. Very good. So this thing is in my screen. I don't want it here. I want it here. Oh yeah, that's totally fine. So anyone on the streaming side, how's the audio? Everything okay? Coming through okay? One Mississippi, two Mississippi. Hi. Yeah. Okay, excellent. It is now 18. Hello. We can just take a few minutes for other people to show up who are still like chewing the last of their meals or coming out of their last late meeting. So I want to go back to some trivia. Last time, so last week, we did the same CodingDojo, and I showed you this thing. And I asked the question, if I wear a mask like this, what profession does that make me? This thing. Ooh. So the answer is, of course, plague doctor. Plague doctors used to wear this. They were commissioned across Europe to combat the Black Death, the bubonic plague. In Dutch, they're called pestmeester, for those interested. And they were commissioned to combat the plague with their most up-to-date knowledge, which was called miasma theory, which is a theory of medicine that says that illness, especially the plague, is caused when people are exposed to the bad smell that comes off of the bodies of people who are already suffering from the plague. So the disease spreads that way, which of course we know is not true. The plague then kindly wiped out a third to 2/3 to 3/4 of Europe. And, well, basically then after that we got the phase of medicine that had like something to do with bacteria and viruses and soap and soup, which is a lot better. So before that, there was actually a theory of medicine that was called humorism. And I have a question for you about that. But there's a question from chat first. Go ahead. Can you actually... Can I actually read this now? No, I can't actually read this, but I have someone else reading it for me, so it sort of works. Anyway, I have a question for you without Googling. Just see if you know this one. The previous theory of medicine was called humorism. It was very popular in Europe, also in Arabia, I believe. And it says that, in a nutshell, the human body is healthy if the four humors that are inside it are in balance. And the human humors are sort of liquids that are inside your body. And if they're in good balance, then you're in good health. And if they go out of balance, then you get ill. So the question is, what are those four humors, those four liquids? What are they called? Does anyone know? Just for the hell of it. I will of course tell you in a moment. Blood, water, alcohol, and alcohol. Close. People did definitely like a lot of their alcohol back then. Well, they still do, but no, it's close, but not it. Actually, I'll just tell you. The four humors, they were blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Right. Those were the 4 liquids that were supposed to be in your body to a certain ratio. And so what they would do is, like if you were getting ill and the physicians thought that you had too much blood, they would just cut you open and let out some blood. Just bloodletting. It would make you better, right? And then they also had leeches, which I suppose could change the humors in some other way, which is, of course, definitely not how you treat disease, like not at all. But it's the best we had for, well, a couple hundred years, maybe, I think. So I thought that was very interesting, especially in these times of, forced lockdown and biohazards going around. It feels like after 9 months in basically 9 months working from home, it feels like I've had enough. I miss seeing you guys. I miss hanging out. I miss the old faces and the new faces and the familiar places. But I would like to just take a moment and remember that we don't have it that bad with our modern understanding of things. And I kind of feel like if we have any obligation at all to the people who came before us, who were like enduring all this suffering and death, then it's to make sure that the future is going to be even better, which is, in a sense, I suppose, why we're all here, trying to upgrade yourself, upgrade the world. That's sort of how it works. Anyway, I've talked for 5 minutes. Let's get started. Welcome to the public virtual async CodingDojo. I'll switch this thing to the thing. There we go. I have some presentations prepared for you, but first of all, I would like to say thank you very much for showing up in your spare time to come and have a look at what we've cooked up over here. That's very much appreciated. The presentations in total shouldn't even fill the hour. I try to talk not too fast. So let's get right to it. I suppose I should click over here. Right. So first we'll set the mood, right? We'll set the mood in the spirit of like dojos and trainings and stuff. So software enlightenment, right? Software enlightenment comes not from mastery of the newest, most trendy language or framework. Instead, it comes from understanding the flaws of all the old ones. Ooh. Isn't that okay? You feeling enlightened yet? Yeah, me neither. Let's move on. So in this presentation, logistics of the virtual dojo, how are we going to approach this, being online and all? Choose your goal, accept the challenge, build a team, understand the puzzle, and then some examples. So after that, like at some point in the future, in the early next year, I would like to review some code, maybe announce some winners based on the output of these sessions. But that's still in the works. So the logistics of the virtual dojo. The first one is this one, obviously. There's a video stream. Hello. There's no point in me putting this link here, because if you need this link, you can't see it. And if you can see this link, then you don't need it. But it's here for completeness sake, let's say. There's the Discord server, central coordination hub of our collaboration enterprises. Please join if you have not already. We're going to need it. Also, I'll be there afterwards, after the presentation. We'll just have chats, hang out, give pointers, have fun. I'll be there. So let's take a moment and consider why to do a coding dojo. There's 2 reasons I came up with. Maybe you have some more in mind, but the first one is you could choose a familiar language or framework or development environment, and this lets you maximize the time you spend tackling the puzzle while following the rules of the challenges. That's one way to approach it. Another way to approach it is to pick something unfamiliar, a different language, a different framework, something that you haven't done before. And this obviously lets you expand your programming experience in general. The first one may be more easily mapped to your day-to-day coding work because you're already in the flow of the language and the framework. But the second one, in the second case, this is a perfect opportunity for you to try something in a new language, a new framework, that takes you beyond the hello world getting started tutorials that you find on the internet. So the challenge will push you beyond that, and then you can see if it's still a nice language or a nice framework when stuff gets a little bit more complicated. So take your pick. In the meantime, I have some challenges prepared for you. The first challenge is unconditional programming, my personal favorite, also called declarative programming. In this challenge, you're not allowed to use any conditional flows in the code of your functions. So that's if statements, switches, whiles, all that kind of conditional branching, nested scopes in your function are prohibited if you accept this challenge. Of course, if you're absolutely stuck using some kind of library that forces you into a conditional flow, that's allowed. I mean, there's nothing we can do about that. So here's an example. Here's some function with some condition, and if some condition, then this, and else, then that. So you're not allowed to do that. No conditional flows. This other line, some value, some condition, is just an inline if statement. It's just hidden, right? You're definitely not allowed to do that. It's trying to hide your if statements. So when in doubt, apply this rule. All the code in your function must execute each time that it is called. I'm going to say that again. All code in a function must execute each time it is called. Sounds like fun, right? All right, so if you have null checks, don't do null checks. Just try and see if you can set up your data in such a way that you don't need them. I'm sure you can manage it. Right. So if you have some library where you have to do this, then of course there's some library you're stuck using. If the resource is available, okay, you're stuck using something conditional right there. Okay, if you have to, then do, but please make sure that you wrap this conditional behavior somewhere nice and then put it away somewhere in a file where you don't have to look at it, and make sure that it doesn't spill over into the rest of your code, because these things tend to do that. The other challenge is tell, don't ask. In this challenge, you're not allowed to use return statements. You're not allowed to use global variables, class variables, side effects, and you're not allowed to misuse exception handling for the purposes of return values. This means that you can't write getter functions, and if you are unfortunate enough to be in a language that has out parameters, don't use those either. So what will that look like? Well, this function, this is not allowed, this example, because there's perform operations, but it takes as input the return values of parse commands, so you can't do that. That's not allowed. When in doubt, you can use this rule. All the data in your functions must originate from input parameters. Now, at this point, I have to say, I've also seen other approaches to tell, don't ask that do allow you to use class variables, so variables scoped to your class. In a way, there's sort of mini globals, but you could take the challenge that way too. So if you say, okay, I want to use a typed class language, kind of languages classes, then if you want, you could still use the class variables. See if you can make them immutable, though. That'd be fun. So you're not, yeah, the idea is that you're not allowed to ask other functions for their opinion and then act on their opinion, but you can tell them to do stuff. That's the way to approach these challenges, or this challenge. Again, if you're stuck using some library, that's allowed. Just put a comment to it if you want, hide it away in some function, and please, please, please make sure that it doesn't influence the rest of your code. It's hard to break a pattern like that once that goes throughout all your functions. Yeah, so here's what I said. If you use an OO language, don't use the internal fields. It's kind of fun not to. I recommend you don't, but if you want to take the challenge the other way, then yeah, go right ahead. Building a team. We recommend a team size of 2 or 3 coders, somewhere in that range. You can join an existing team, or you can make a new one. Here's how you do that. You go to the Discord server and you find or create a channel category, which in its name has your chosen challenge and your chosen language or framework. That's a channel category, not a channel. There's a difference. Inside that category, you can then create a voice channel or a text channel with your team name, where you can then cooperate with the people who are in your team. That'll look something like this. So if I'm going to do the no ifs challenge in Rust, then I make that category up there, and then I put my team in there, Team Cheese Masters. I have a text channel, I have a voice channel. You have the Discord powers to do that. Just take a few minutes for people to generate these categories and set up these teams. This is the link to the Discord server. So these are the categories. Those things are the categories. You can make them. And then inside them, you can make the text and the voice channels. You can use the general channel of the server to find other team members if you'd like. See what other people are up to and see if they want to team up with you. I will take a moment, drink some tea. Excellent. All right. I have a puzzle for you. We're not just going to write code and then follow these challenges. That's something for you to solve, some reason for you to write code. And I'm going to show you, but I have to switch the presentations because it's in a different file. Right there. Puzzle. Everybody ready? Here's the puzzle. Looks like this. That is a maze. We're going to solve a maze, people. That's what we're going to do. So, how are we going to do that? Well, what's the goal? The goal is you have a player character. You have to navigate the maze to find the portal. That's the puzzle. You can stun other players when you run into them to gain the advantage and try to avoid getting stunned back. So you have some sort of attack move that you can use to do this. Mazes are, of course, randomly generated. The starting locations are, of course, randomly generated. And the portal locations are, of course, randomly generated. So how are we going to do this? Well, you have to join somehow. First of all, you should choose a client ID, which is a string, that is for your team, and you should keep it secret. Because that's the thing that you're going to score points to. That's your secret identifier of your team. So pick one, just a string, keep it secret. You can then use the client ID to create a player in the maze. You do that by doing an HTTP post with some JSON to /player/new. You pick a name for your player, can be anything, and you put your client ID. The server will respond with a player ID, which you should probably keep in a variable or something because you're gonna need it. So you can add some additional information to your client so that we know who it is. You can do an HTTP post just with some JSON to /dashboard/decorate. You plug in your client ID right there and some team information. Just put your name, maybe some icons, maybe the names of who's in your team, a link to where you plan to keep your code, and an array with which challenges that you are planning to take on. Now, here, I put both no ifs and tell don't ask. I do not recommend that you attempt both of those challenges at the same time. That's a bit hardcore, right? But you could, for example, do no ifs and say strictly enforce mob programming rules, or strictly do test first or something. And then if you want, you could also put that in that array, just for fun. One more thing. We're going to be talking to a server, a game server, and it's not always there. So you should probably check that it's there before you start sending all these requests to it. You can do an HTTP GET to /dashboard/server, and it'll tell you the last update that the server posted and roughly how many people made a move in the maze recently. So if this timestamp is really long ago, then it's safe to assume that someone turned off the server and it did not crash, because it's my server and it doesn't crash. The endpoint that you're posting these requests to can still be online, even if the server is not. So please check this. Then there's a question. Are these API endpoints documented? Well, sort of, kind of, not really. They're in this presentation, and these files are available to you in PDF. So later on, you can just scroll through them and look it up. But I didn't make any swagger or anything, if you're asking. So that'll do. The other team had no trouble with it. They had it up and running in no time. So imagine that you've joined. You got your player ID. You know the server is there. And ask, what is my status? Like, where am I in the maze? And you can do that by doing a post to /player/status, put your player ID in there, and you'll get a response that looks something like this. That's an array of wall distances, and that's an array of entities. I will explain. The wall distances, the array is always 4 integers long, supposedly, indicates the number of squares you can move in each of the cardinal directions. So, for example, the first one is north, then it's east, then it's south, then it's west. So in this example, the 0th index is 1, so you could take 1 step to the north. The first index 1, is 0, so there's a wall right there to the east. The second index 2, is 1, so you could take 1 step south. And index number 3 is 2, so you could still take 2 steps in that direction. So this is how you can see your surroundings in the maze, or at least how many steps you can make. You don't know your absolute coordinate in the maze, and you never will. The API will never tell you. So there are a whole bunch of things you can encounter in the maze, and other players and foreign objects will show up in your entities array. It'll look something like this. So the array contains an object. The object has a visual, for example, boxes. It has a name, for example, some boxes. And it has that same distances array telling you where from your current position you are seeing this thing. In this case, 2 squares to the west, there are some boxes that you can see. Other players can appear as anything. So they could be like warriors or skeletons or princesses or whatever, all kinds of different stuff. It's important to keep in mind you can encounter passive objects as well, just statues, trees, and boxes, and a whole bunch of random stuff. Keep your eye out for the thing that's called portal, that looks like a portal, because that's where you need to go. It's good to know that other entities don't block your passage. You can safely issue a move order to a square where you know there's already something on it. That works just fine. In fact, you should move to the square with the portal on it, because that's how you complete the maze. Okay, so Ben, how do we move? That's not that hard. You just do a post /player/move, put in your player ID, and pick a direction. The direction is then an integer. The valid values are 0, 1, 2, and 3. And you'll receive a response that looks like this. Frame time milliseconds. What is frame time? Well, the server takes some time to process all the requests, and the frame time indicates how much time it takes the game engine to process 1 frame of game time. That is, if you issue a move command and then you wait this length of time, you can be reasonably sure that your move was carried out. So then the next time you get your status, it should have changed if you've made a valid move. Shooting is really similar. So you just do /player/shoot with your player ID and a direction. Directions are, again, of course, 1, a 0, 1, 2, or 3. Your shoot range is limited to 2 squares, so that's the one right next to you and the one next to that. After you shoot, you cannot shoot again for 2 frames. You'll receive the same response, the frame time in milliseconds, as a reply from the server. So, about shooting, should you get hit by another player's attack, then you'll be paralyzed for a number of frames. If you ask your status while you're paralyzed, it'll look like this. It'll look like you're enclosed by walls on all sides and you can't see any other entities. It's not very handy. Any shoot or move commands you issue while paralyzed will not work. Your paralyzed time won't increase if you get shot again. So it's not like the player can just stand there and keep shooting you. That doesn't give you extra penalty. Also, after you recover from being paralyzed, you're immune for a number of frames. So this prevents people from just completely preventing you from making any moves. All right then, so how do you score points for your team? Well, to score points, you must complete the maze. That is, you have to find a portal somewhere in the maze. After you complete the maze, the team information that you posted to the dashboard decorate will be included in the information of people who completed the maze. This will also have the number of steps you took to complete the maze, the size of the maze that you completed, the number of people you managed to hit along the way, the number of times other people managed to hit you, and the timestamp of when you completed the maze, just for completeness sake. So you can view this dashboard. You can just do a get to slice dashboard, and you can see who else has already completed the maze, which teams, and how they did. What to do if you don't exist? It might happen that you don't exist, that you get a response called player ID not found. That can happen all the time, and it can happen for a number of reasons. The game engine reserves the right to kick players out of the maze for any reason, and indeed for no reason at all. Events that may cause people to be kicked from the maze include, but are not limited to, you enter the portal. That would be good, but then you are out of the maze. But, this is good. Try do this. Inactivity. If you don't move for a long time, the game server will kick you out. The maze you're in is being recycled. A new one's being generated to take its place. That happens once in a while. The server crashed. That never happens. The server didn't crash, but someone was messing with it. Okay, that happens sometimes, I'm afraid to say. What you can do in these cases, you simply call /player/new, and then you can get right back to it. The maze will be live streamed here on this channel. I'll switch it over to the laptop after we're done with all the presentations. Then you can see your characters running around in the maze and other teams solving the puzzle in sort of real time, because there's an enormous delay on the live stream, of course. A special thanks to Gertjan for hosting the endpoint. The endpoint can be found at dojomaze-api.maas.codes. Happy hacking! Yes, that's a good point. The documents are available in the docs channel on Discord. So if you're there, I printed these to PDF. There you can find what the calls are like and what the signatures are like and get started in your chosen language, framework, and challenge. And on this channel, for now, I have 2 presentations prepared for help with the challenges. So avoiding conditional flows and tell, don't ask. Well, I'll show them to you right after I drink some tea. If there's a problem with the URLs, I will I'll take a look at that in a moment. If you can find Gert-Jan, who's also on the Discord, maybe he can help you out because he's hosting the endpoint. Also, I just want to say that I want to sort of go back in time and tell you how all this came about, right? Because just a few months ago, I was just sitting there thinking to myself, and I thought, self, when was the last time we had one of those coding dojos organized by Stefan and Mark? And turns out the last one was somewhere in late January, early February, right? So I figure, why not see if we can do something like that, but put it in an online format? So then over the next few weeks, and I believe a holiday was in there too, spent on it. I tinker this together. Hope you'll have fun with it. Anyway, I will explain how to do unconditional programming, or some pointers for how to do unconditional programming. This is here's some examples. I have a pointer. I can. That's a pen. Roger that. There you go. Okay. Avoiding conditional flows. Consider this code right here on the left. There's some situation that sets a flag given some condition. It sets a bit of data. The bit of data is called choose A. It sets it to false, and then in some other cases it sets it to true. Later on, the choice is executed, so execute the choice, checks that bit of data, and then redirects execution given that condition. Classic if statement, right? We can avoid this conditional flow by, instead of setting a bit of data that later on must be checked, we change the execution pathway directly. So the way we can do that is we make a function pointer, a pointer to some address. We initialize it to an empty function nicely. And then in some situation, we assign that function pointer to either operation A or operation B. Later on, we can simply execute the chosen operation without having to check any data to see which direction that the execution should go. This is called dynamic dispatch. It's also a lot of fun if you have an object-oriented language and you do this with classes, interfaces, or other abstract types, where you can invoke virtual methods or abstract methods that can redirect your execution without you having to check which way the execution should go. Another case often seen looks like this. So imagine I have a coordinate. Coordinate has two components, an x and a y component, and I can add them together. Presumably that just adds each component and then returns a new coordinate. If I want to move in a direction, given a coordinate and a direction, well, if the direction is 0, then I want to add 1 to the y component. And if the direction is 1, then I add 1 to the x component. And you see here, this is the northeast, southwest, but it's written out. And then this function returns the moved coordinate. Classic switch case. If you want to make a switch case, you could easily do that. So how you avoid this is you could make a map. Instead of treating your input data, instead of using your input data to redirect execution, you can treat it as a key to look up the data that you need in a map. So we look down here. What I did is I made a move handler map. The key is an integer. The output is a coordinate. It's just preloaded in memory. And when I want to move in a direction, I simply look up the move coordinate, add them, and return it. And I lost all the conditional flow in that function. Each line of code executes each time the function is called. These are my two main examples of how to avoid conditional flows. There are more to be found on the internet, so don't be afraid to go looking for them. Also, some languages lend themselves better to this stuff than others. which can be a benefit or a challenge depending on how you want to look at it. I have a similar few pages prepared for tell, don't ask. Actually, it's just one. It looks like this. There's a question about the conditional flow. How about I look with you at that after I do this one, because we're almost there, and then I'll just join the Discord. We can have a chat. So consider this code up here. There's a main function. The main function calls an HTTP post to the join endpoint that gives you a player ID, and then the player ID is handled by some handle player ID function. This obviously violates tell, don't ask, because we're asking the HTTP join for the player ID, or we know that it returns that, and then we pass it along. The point of tell, don't ask is to make sure that your functions, or indeed your classes, don't acquire any more information than they strictly need. And this is a good example of that, because the main function doesn't actually need to know the player ID, because it doesn't do anything with it. It just passes it on to the other function. So we could rewrite this, and then it looks like this here on the right, where we go to the HTTP post function, and we don't ask it for the player ID, but we tell it where to put the output. So instead of returning some value, we say, you just do this post to this endpoint with this client ID, and the output goes in this function. Good luck. Don't tell me anything about the reply. So something else is amiss here in this handle player ID function. We have a player, which is some sort of player controller, has a player ID. We have a path that has some sort of mode. I don't really care. While we're running, while the path is not finished, then we're asking the path, hey, path, are you finished? Then we ask it, what is your next step? Please give me your next step. And then we tell the player to take that step. And then when the path is finished, we generate the next one. Kind of sort of makes sense, but we can do it without asking. We can do it by telling. So if you want to change this into how you do it, just telling, then instead of asking the path, is it finished, and asking the path for the next step, you just tell the path, please move the player. Here's the player. Go move it. I don't want to know. I don't want to know your direction. I don't want to know if you're finished. Just move the player. Oh, by the way, if you're finished, here's a callback. Just do this. Generate the new path for me. Just figure out what to do next. But I don't want to know. This function doesn't need to know that. So it minimizes the information that is in your functions. Needless to say, that helps clean up a lot of code if you do that thoroughly. That's it. That was my last presentation. Did it in 35 minutes flat. That's not too bad. Hello. Thanks very much for tuning in, for listening. I'm going to be on Discord if you have any questions, comments, remarks, or other natural disasters. And on this stream, you will be able to see the maze. Live, sort of. Thanks very much.